Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and whatever time of day it is on this fine Saturday, August 9. It may be August 10, depending if you're in maybe Australia, New Zealand. I feel that's probably a little bit ahead of me. But I hope you're all doing well. Hope everybody's having a great weekend so far, great Saturday so far. And, looking forward to hopefully what is a fun and entertaining live stream. So it's really, we'll give a few minutes, just let people drop in, say hi, etc. If you're watching this live on YouTube at the moment, you can drop in the comments. You just say hi, let me know what you're about, what your podcast is. And if you have any questions, let me just pop that up. A quick moment. There we go. If you have any questions, just drop that in the comments below and I'll pick that up for you and we'll go through it from there. But it's really just like a bit of fun on a Saturday. I have a podcast called 1 Minute Podcast Tips, and that, as the name suggests, is a podcast about podcasting tips in a minute or less. And really, this is more like an extension of that, where it's all about helping you be a better podcaster, whatever your goals are with your podcast, whether that's audio, whether it's video, etc. Growing your show, publishing a podcast, your very first podcast, all the cool stuff that comes with podcasting. So if you have any questions, etc., as I mentioned, drop them in the comments below and we'll go through that together. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. If I don't know the answer, I will make a note of the question and I'll find out for you. If you're signed up to my newsletter, I'll send that out. But I'll also look to try and drop that in the following, in the next live stream in 2 weeks' time, for example. I'll probably be doing these live streams every other week. See how they go. As I mentioned, generally I don't do video a lot. I prefer audio first. So that's my audio, if you like, my audio first podcasting. Hey Frank, good to see you, bud. Hope you're in. Are you in Philly already? I know you were going to Philadelphia. Are you in Philly already? Let's just have a look. There you go. That's just up there. I know you're driving to Philly today to see your son, so that's going to be awesome. So let's just. Okay. I'm just getting used to there we go. Just getting used to the live stream features. I haven't really done live streams before with Boomcaster, which is the platform I use for my remote recording. I've done one before last year, I think, when one of my podcasts turned 1 year old, just for a bit of fun, and I enjoyed that. But haven't really used Boomcaster for live streaming, so I'm ironing out the kinks. The audio might be a little wonky, and I do apologize. I was speaking to Harry, the founder, and it looks like AWS compresses the audio on live streams. So I just need a little bit of tweaking behind the scenes. So hopefully by the time the next one pops along, alrighty, that's awesome. Let's show the Sunstream. Not a problem. Kick them all with the curb. Do that. Get rid of them all. Get rid of them all. We always need more podcasts. There's not enough podcasts. There's a lot of videos, not enough podcasts, but we always need more podcasts. And if we don't, not a problem if that's your preference. And you aren't fairly perfect. So yeah, we've got some questions that came in from my email that went out for the live stream. I've got some that also popped in earlier. And as I mentioned, if you've got a question yourself, drop it into the comments and I'll look to pick that up for you. Okay, but my name, so a little bit about myself, and I'm sure this will get a little bit smoother as I wander through these live streams. But my name is Danny Brown. I'm a podcast that's been in the podcasting space for about 10 years now, maybe just under 10 years. Primarily audio first, with some video podcasts. I currently have 3 podcasts, so 2 of my own and 1 that I co-host. So there's 1 Minute Podcast Tips, there's 5 Random Questions, which is like an interview entertainment show, and then In and Around Podcasting, which is about the podcasting industry, that I co-host with my colleague from Captivate, where I'm head of podcaster support and experience, Mark Asquith. And we're in the process of revamping that format as well to do some more fun stuff as well. So looking forward to that. So yeah, like I said, I've been in podcasting space for about 10 years now, and it's something I love with a passion, especially the indie podcaster space. So anytime I can get together with podcasters like you and do something fun like this. It's one of the reasons I started the 1 Minute Podcast Tips show, is to help other podcasters, with hopefully experience that I've grown over the years. And as I mentioned, if I don't know it, I'll generally try to find out from someone that is far smarter than me when it comes to that topic and find out for you. So what we'll do, as I mentioned, if you've got any questions, drop them in the comments and I'll pick that up later. And also, don't be afraid to say hi, where you're from, where you're about in the world. If you've got a podcast, drop the name and a link in the comments. We'd love to check it out. But as mentioned, I did get some questions previously. So one of the ones that came, well, Frank, who's in the comments now and on the live stream, sent through some great questions as a response to my email that went out from my newsletter. So I'm going to look at these questions. Ali Gray also had a really good question about room treatment for podcasting, and then some questions that I picked up from Reddit, which I'll go through as well. And then, as I mentioned, if you've got any questions yourself, drop them in the comments, and we'll have a look at that and go through for you. So the first question that Frank dropped in was, what are your thoughts on the Wondery dissolution, the layoffs and the transfer of the brand under Audible? And this was a big news story over the last week, I guess, the last few days, where Wondery, which is like a podcast studio, stroke network, but more of a production studio, um, they're laying off 110 people, including the CEO, as they move the Wondery brand into Amazon, who owns Wondery, and into the Audible production side. Um, so a big change, and there's a lot of discussion online about it, both on Pod News, which is industry publication, awesome publication, as well as online discussions in Reddit and Blue Sky, Twitter, etc., or X, I guess now. Um, Myself, I don't know too much about the behind the scenes stuff. And James, as I mentioned, James over at Pod News has a great piece on this. And if I just open that up a quick sec, so I'm going to share screen for a quick sec actually. And let's go to this and I'll show you this here. Okay, so James has got a great piece on Pod News about the Wondery layoffs. And he goes into the details of when Amazon bought Wondery back in 2020. And you can see here they bought it for $300 million. And then they doubled its staff to, I guess, whatever the staffing was at the time then, they doubled the staff at that time. And they've got about 360 published podcasts or published shows. So what they're doing is the podcast studio will now be combined with Audible and merging with the talent services team. And they'll also be creating a different ads and sponsorship platform with an entirely new team that includes the existing ad sales, etc. So there's a lot of stuff going on there. And Ashley Carmen over at Bloomberg has also a really good piece. It is paywall, so you do need a membership there. But there's a lot of discussion around it. From my own take, and this is my really 10,000 foot overview. I'm not in this industry like news like James and Ashley are. But from my own take, I'm kind of wondering if the problem was, I don't know how many people were involved in the production of Wondery podcasts, but I know obviously as you get into more branded podcasts and bigger production houses and publishing houses when it comes to podcasting, you're going to have a bigger team. So as opposed to an indie podcaster who's generally the sole person. So like for my own podcast, for example, I'll do all the research, the planning, the editing, recording, post-production, promotion, all that stuff is done by myself. For the show that I co-host with Mark, we'll do that. We'll share that duty, obviously. But for the most part, an indie creator will just have the sole person. With Wondery and other large houses like that and large publishing teams like that, you have a team, and that generally includes producers, editors, researchers, data folks, etc. So there's a lot more people that you have to pay money to for a wage. Obviously, you have to pay their wages for that team. So as you start to add more people to the team, the costs go up, which puts more pressure on that podcast to be profitable, whether that's from ads or sponsorships, etc., and doing that over a long time. Now with Wondery, they're more about the narrative of their podcast. They're more like storytelling and narratives, as opposed to say interviews or solo shows, etc. So that takes a lot longer to produce as well. You've got a longer production time. So all of that time is being spent, paying for something outwards without having money coming in, I guess. So from my own point of view, I'm just wondering, with no pun intended, wondering if it's more to do with the fact that the production team is pretty large and the cost of producing certain podcasts may be more than how much these podcasts are bringing in. Some of the podcasts might be super successful, but on any network, you'll always have podcasts that are really successful and have a lot of listeners, downloads, etc. And you'll have some that are maybe less successful. As far as numbers go, maybe not so less successful when it comes to sponsorships, but hard numbers, etc. Um, so that would be my thinking, and I feel we might see more of this. As you know, it's one of the reasons Spotify don't do exclusives or rarely do exclusives now. They've sort of pulled away from that, step back from that. Obviously, Rogan was a big exclusive, and he's no longer exclusive. Uh, Call Her Daddy is no longer exclusive to Spotify. That went elsewhere. So I feel when you get to these big exclusive deals, it's a lot harder now, or it will be a lot harder to do that, and you won't see as many, jobs, as many as we saw before. So that's just like, as I say, that's just really my take on it. I'm not James over at Pod News and Ashley over at Bloomberg are two people to check out to really get the deep dive on it. But that would be my feeling is like the cost kind of outweighs the income and revenue. And we got Dave in Ontario. That's awesome. How are we doing, Dave? Let's just go up here. Fellow Scotsman, awesome. How's your accent? I get told I'm in that sort of weird in between where I've been away from Scotland now since I left Scotland when I was 2021, so over 30 years ago, and I lived in England for about 15 years, lived and worked there, lived in Australia for 6 months, and I've been in Canada since 2006. So I do get told that my accent can be a little bit off at times. If I call home, for example, my folks will give me grief. But when I'm here in Canada, they'll say, "Oh, you're from Scotland. Where about?" That kind of stuff. So weird, little weird in betweener there, if you like. Um, Now, as I mentioned, Frank sent in some really good questions. And this one pops up quite a bit. So Frank wanted to know, there's so much hype revolving around video podcasting, yet numerous studies reveal that anywhere from 30 to 60% of the video audience listens with the screen minimized or video in the background as they engage in other activities. So basically like an audio podcast. Could video podcasting be the latest 3D TV or Google Glass, which were new, much touted technologies that faded after their initial release? It's a weird one, video. I always just look at podcasting as shows. I tend to call mine shows because Mark, my colleague at Captivate, always says this when he's speaking about this kind of question. The end listener or the end consumer, whether that's listener or viewer, etc., doesn't really care about the technology and how they're getting the content into their ears and in front of their eyes, etc. Is why people don't care if you've got an RSS feed or don't have an RSS feed. And I know there's a whole back and forth. Is it a podcast if it's not got RSS feed, for example? I don't really buy into that kind of discussion. And yes, RSS feed, I fully support and want the open RSS feed uh, e- ecosystem to continue and to survive. We don't want to be closing off the gardens and putting all your content behind paywalls and only available on certain platforms, etc. Because that takes away from me the beauty of what made podcasting in the first place. Anybody can access it regardless of technology. You can listen on an app, you can listen on a website, you can watch on YouTube, etc. So I don't think video podcasts or shows, etc., will disappear. I mean, videos have been around since what, 2005, I think. YouTube launched 2004, 5, something like that. They weren't long after Facebook, around about the same time. And they've continued to live and grow. And obviously, YouTube is a massive, massive platform now. So they've continued to grow and, alongside audio podcasts and also alongside TV, streaming, channels, movie theaters, etc. So I don't feel there's a this or that. It's not a this or them kind of thing. You can't just be video or audio. You can have a mixture of both. And it's funny, I mentioned it on, I think it was on LinkedIn the other day actually, where if you want to do video, do video. If you want to do audio, do audio. If you want to do both, do both. It's what makes you feel comfortable. I feel the sort of the talk around video first is being pushed by certain like brands, for example, that are really leaning heavily into the video space, which makes sense because that's where they feel that maybe they can make more revenue for the platform. But as you mentioned, a lot of people, when you hear about video podcasting, a lot of times people do have it on in the background. I sometimes have YouTube on in the background while I'm pottering about, just because it's easier for me to stream to my Nest, for example, or my Google Home, for example. So I'll have it on in the background. If I want to watch something on YouTube, I will make the time to sit down and physically watch it. James over at Pod News has a great saying where video is for when your ears are tired. I think that's right. I think I've paraphrased it. I may have got it wrong there, but I think that's right. And I think that's an awesome saying. You know, if you want to watch video, you will take the time and watch that. If it's on YouTube, if it's on a smart TV, and you're, you know, got a podcast app open and it's got a video version. So it's why you see more people often in both versions. But for me, yeah, I don't think it'll disappear as such, Frank. I think it'll just be, it's always going to be there, and it's always going to be an option that if you want it, you can have it, and if you don't, you can, you know, you can not have it and do it differently that way. No, Ashley had a great question. Not Ashley, I apologize. Ali Gray, who's one of my newsletter subscribers. She mentions that I feel my room could be better when it comes to sound, but put off by the cost. Is it expensive to get good sound treatment? And I would say no. Um, I mean, obviously, if you do a video show and your environment has to look a certain way, it can be expensive, depending on if you want to get certain types of sound panels or you want a certain design, a look and feel, an aesthetic, etc. But for me, you can't really see it because obviously I've just got like the screen, the wall behind me. I do have sound panels behind me, and I've got a sound absorption blanket, which is that black one where my finger is. Get that back into focus. Just behind me, where my finger's pointing. That's a sound absorption blanket, and that was about maybe $100 on, I think it was Amazon where I got this, or my local audio store. I can't recall now. Um, but the rest is just basically so out of shot. If you do have a video podcast, out of shot, I have a moving blanket, for example. I've got two moving blankets. I've got a big easy chair that's over in the corner, which is nice and soft, so that takes up and soaks in a lot of sound and takes away the hardness from the room. I've got a rug underneath me. I've got a gaming mat on my desk, so it doesn't. Sometimes when people speak about treating your room, great, obviously do that to get great audio, but they forget about the desk. So you've got like a big hard desk there, and when you speak, the sound will bounce off the desk and come back and give you reverb. So I've got a soft gaming mat, for example, on the desk, so it's not expensive. If um, if you've got blankets at home, you know, you can put them up on the wall, and that will be a good solution, and inexpensive because you've already got the blankets at home. That'll be a really good solution to do without spending money. But you can buy stuff depending again on your budget and what you want to look, what you want to have the surroundings look like, etc. You can do that relatively inexpensively. The most expensive thing in here that I bought as a dedicated cost would be the sound panels you see behind me and the blanket, the sound absorption blanket. But even that was probably about all told $200 to $250 because I've got a couple of corner corner traps or base traps, sorry, in the corner. So I've got a couple of them facing me as I look at them. So yeah, I probably spent about a couple $100. So it doesn't have to be expensive. And as I say, you've probably got a bunch of stuff that you can use at home already, which is, you know, soft furnishings, rugs. If you need to buy a rug, that could maybe be expensive, but you don't have to spend thousands upon thousands of dollars. That's the main thing, because I think that's where sometimes a lot of fear about cost comes in. Is you see really nice sound panels, and they are expensive. You may be talking about $200 to $300 per panel when you get the proper studio ones, and that'll really add up pretty quickly. But as an indie podcaster, an indie creator, you don't have to spend a lot. But that's a great question. Um, I'm going to open up a couple of comments that I saw over on Reddit actually, because I suffer from this. So this one actually talks to me. So let me just bring up my screen again, and let's jump over to Reddit. So this one is a really good question. Breathing and lip smacking noises drive me mad. So Cheese Lover 69 over on Reddit in the podcasting subreddit just mentions that I'm hoping you can shed some light on how I can record better sounding episodes. So they have a baby podcast. They use a Blue Yeti microphone, and they've got it on cardioid mode, and they've got voice meter, etc., and aggressive gate setting. Probably want to drop the gate setting there a little bit. But once the recording is done, my girlfriend processes it using a compressor, limiter, and another gate. Then he starts with the rough edit, fine edit, etc. However, even though we're doing what we can to be mindful during the recordings, I still find there's a lot of breathing noises before and after I speak, and little lip smacking noises as well. How do I make them better? Am I breathing louder than others due to chronic fatigue? As someone that, as a father, I remember the days of newborn babies. So I completely get you on chronic fatigue. And if you're tired, you can breathe louder because you're starting to doze off, obviously. But the lip smacking is pretty much every or most creators will have this or have gone through this at some point. And I know I still suffer from it. And the best lip smacking is basically when your mouth is dry. And when you're speaking into your microphone, you can then pick up these little noises that like, and I'm not going to do it too much because if people were suffering from misona, that's a condition where noises like that make you, they can really cause you issues. So your mental wellness can suffer. You can feel, anxious, etc., because of these noises. So it is a condition, and it does affect a lot of people. Um, and even, if for non-misona sufferers, lip smacking can obviously be very distracting and ruin an audio if it's constant. So there's a couple of things that you can do here. As I mentioned, it's generally because your mouth is dry. So you want to hydrate pre-recording and usually start to hydrate really well 3, 4 hours before you're going to sit down and record. And speaking of hydrating, you can take a sip of water. So what you want to do is try and make yourself as hydrated as possible, and that will reduce and certainly negate, but it doesn't remove them completely. It will certainly reduce the amount of lip smacks that you're hearing. Mic technique is also really good. So generally, you may have been advised to talk into the mic, and it may be it can depend on the mic that you have. Condenser mics are a little bit more, powerful, so you don't have to be right up on the mic to get good volume. Whereas dynamic mics, they need to be powered externally. So generally, you need to get closer to a dynamic mic, which they can then obviously enhance and highlight the smacking noise. But what you can do is place your mic at about a 45-degree angle to your mouth. So don't have it right in front of you. Have it to the side or underneath you, or even if you've got a boom arm come, pointing down towards your mouth, but angle your mic about 45 degrees away from your mouth. So you're almost like speaking across the microphone. So if I stop sharing the screen quickly, okay, and go back to here. So this is the microphone I've got at the moment. I'm speaking across it. I'm not going directly. This is me going directly into it, and you probably hear the difference in tone and timbre there. But if I speak away from it and go across it, that's now a better mic technique. Um, oh, we got now the good fun people in the comments. Okay, you probably missed the introduction, but that's okay, not a problem. That's why I don't really look at numbers, but I appreciate the comment. Cheers. So that's what, that's where you can improve your mic technique, for example. Okay. But yeah, that's one of the ways you can do it. There's also tools that you can use in post-production. So Isotope, for example, has a really good declicker plugin that's generally, compatible with every plugin, with every editor, in DAW. So yeah, that's another way you can do it in post-production. But ideally, if you can do it in like pre-production, it removes that, that option that you have to do in post. But that's also a great question. And another one in Reddit. So let me just bring this over and we'll do this one. Is it possible to have a quality podcast with a headset with built-in mic? And yes, it is. Again, it can come down to your mic technique, even with a headset with the built-in mic. A lot of podcasters that are streamers as well, like full-time streamers, often you'll see them with headset mics on. So you can do it. It depends, obviously, the quality of the mic helps and your mic technique again. So you don't want to have the mic right up close to your mouth because you'll have, the heavy breathing. If you've got heavy breathing, you've got the lip smacks, but you've also got any noises you may have when you're moving, for example. And if if your chin's rubbing against it or something like that, you can have these noises. So you can have it, and there's some great headsets out there. I don't have any details on the headsets at the moment, but yeah, there's like some great headsets around there that you can do it. I know certainly when I go to podcasting events and I'll see people recording, on the show floor, they do walk around with the headsets and the built-in mic as well as lavalier mics, for example. So there's a few options there you can do, but you can definitely have a quality podcast. Again, it really just comes down to, learning mic technique, understanding, your gain settings, your volume levels, etc., and what's going to be the best sound for the kind of, podcast and for the kind of recording you're going to do. And again, as you start to use it more, you'll start to, get more experience with it, and you will understand, the placement, the recording, the sound volume, the levels, etc. So yeah, you can definitely have that in there. Okay. So I'm going to look at another question that Frank dropped in. which was, do you envision a podcast app that only lists independent podcasts and excludes all network podcasts? The app could hold fund drives for different podcasts. So I do and I don't. The only reason for that is obviously people want to listen to podcasts on a single app, ideally. It's why the likes of Spotify are trying to become a super app, so you can listen to music, watch video, listen to audio podcasts, read audio, listen to audiobooks, etc., all from the one app. So because of that, there was, generally you're not going to be limited to just indie shows and indie podcasts. It is going to share space with production, larger branded podcasts and production house podcasts, etc. But one of the ones that I find does a reasonably good job at trying to fix this problem is Good Pods. So Good Pods is both a web app and uh, a podcast app, and I use the podcast app more than the web app. It's just more, it's more feature rich on the podcast app, and there can be some glitches now and again on the web version. But what Good Pods does is, if you've got a podcast, you've claimed it, etc. So Good Pods has a really good discovery option. But if you've claimed your podcast, you'll notice that, for example, they've got indie technology charts. Okay, so you can see indie only option. So every podcast that's on Good Pods is part of their relevant category. So if that's technology, if it's business, if it's marketing, if it's like storytelling, whatever that looks like. But you'll notice here that on the charts, if you like, or the lists, Good Pods has an option to display indie only. You can turn that off, and that will give you all the podcasts, including larger network podcasts, etc. But if you only want to see independent ones, you would go to the relevant category that you're interested in and view the charts for that category, and then just look at indie only. And this is obviously available on the podcast app as well. You've got detailed items there, or you can go to the list view, okay, which is not just quite doing at the moment. One of the reasons, again, I prefer the podcast app version as opposed to the web version. So that's one way that you could do it. And I guess another option that you could do is, obviously you can create a list for yourself in your existing podcast app. It doesn't have to be Good Pods, but a folder that's just purely dedicated to indie podcasts, and add that to that. So Pocket Cast, for example, is really good at allowing you to set up folders and then add, podcasts to that folder. And now that's where I go to listen to the Mercury Network podcast, for example. I've got all the podcasts on the Mercury Network in this Mercury folder. I can then just jump in there and listen to them at any time. And it also makes it super easy for me to share that with people looking for other podcasts. Instead of trying to make a list of 5, 10, 15, 20 podcasts, I can just share the link to that. So I don't feel that we'll get to a place where there's just purely an independent podcast app. Then maybe. I'm just wondering if that would be viable enough for the developer to run, unless they were getting a share of any revenue from podcasters, etc., or users paid a premium fee each year or each month, kind of like what Pocket Cast used to do before they opened it up. Then you could do it that way, maybe, where it's viable. But I feel that for an indie only podcast, I would say probably not at the moment. Probably not at the moment. Well, thank you. Thanks, Dave. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's like, this is the fun part about live streaming. Obviously people like to drop comments, and that's fine. I'm old enough and ugly enough to take comments online, so that's all good. But I appreciate that, Dave. Cheers for that, mate. So yeah, I would say from a podcast that point of view, just from an ease of use as well. People do want to try, listen on their favorite app. And that includes shows that are indie only and shows that are bigger networks, etc. I know I listen to some big network shows. I try to listen primarily to indie podcasters, but I will listen to some larger podcasts. And it would just be easier for me to stay on that app as opposed to having a separate one. But no, good question, though. I like it. And there was another good question here as well. Again from Frank, and thanks for all these questions, Frank. I know you sent them because you're traveling to see your son today in Philly, but these were awesome questions that you sent via email, so I really appreciate that. But Frank's final question is, how can advanced podcasting tools help indie podcasters? So there's a few ways, and I guess it depends on what you feel advanced podcaster tools are. Like for AI tools, for example, I mentioned one of the questions earlier was about lip smacking and noises and loud breathing on podcast recordings and how to make that better. So obviously AI tools can help that. So I mentioned that the declicker plugin from Isotope can help you remove these clicks from your recordings. So that will really help, obviously, make a more polished sound. There's a great tool called Auphonic. So if I just bring up my screen again, and I'll just share that with you. But yeah, there's a great tool called Auphonic, which, as you can see, it says your AI sound engineer for audiobooks, engineers, podcasts, and videos, etc. Okay, so basically what this does is you can upload your video or audio file, and this will automatically repair anything that needs, fixing or optimizing. So if you have a look at it, as I mentioned here, you can get 2 hours free each month, or you can also take out a monthly license, or you can buy big chunks of time as you need it, which is what I do. If I need to use it, I'll buy, say, 5 hours or 10 hours, etc. Okay, but what it does, and Auphonic is really good. It's helped me a few times in the past where the audio coming inwards hasn't been great for whatever reason. Maybe I was at a trade show, for example. But you can see here, these are the features that Auphonic have, and that's intelligent leveler. So it makes sure that all the levels are equal between speakers, music, and speech. And it will also duck and lower the music behind it so it's not overpowering if you've got music, underneath your speaker. Noise and reverb reduction. So again, if your recording space isn't ideal, it will take out any of that echo, that reverb or noise. If, like I mentioned, if you're at a trade show, that's a really good one. It's got filtering, auto EQ, so DS or deplosive, etc., to really give it a more pleasant, sound. Some of the new features that it released was cut filler words, coughs, and silence. So if you're doing a live stream, for example, there's going to be times where you may cough, and generally you'll try and mute yourself, but there's going to be some times when you can't quite get to that mute button. So this will remove that for you. It will also, record multi-tracks and do automatic ducking and noise gate. Remove crosstalk, which if you've got multiple hosts or co-hosts on the same podcast and they're speaking at the same time, that's crosstalk. And it can be really hard to identify who's speaking and what they're saying if the talk is left in like that. So crosstalk removal is really good for removing some of that, and it will feature, that, or it'll highlight the feature of the lead speaker. Loudness specifications, really good. Ideally, you want your audio loudness to be the same across, all apps. And if you've got ads and music, etc., you want them to be the same. There's nothing worse than if you're in a car and you're listening to a podcast, or you've got headphones on, or however you're listening, and the host volume is one thing, and then an ad comes in and that's a bit louder, and then another ad comes in and that's super quiet. So you got to turn the volume up, and then the host comes back in and that's super loud now because you've turned the volume down. So what loudness specifications does is it ensures that you've got the proper loudness for podcasting, which is minus 16 lufs generally for mono and minus 19 for stereo. Most people just use minus 16, to be honest. And that's just like the industry standard for audio podcasting. So Auphonic will make it really easy. And they'll do speech to text and automatic show notes, and they'll offer video support, metadata, and chapters. So that's a great way that Auphonic can really help you, speed up the production time. You've also got something like Podcasts Adobe Enhance, for example, that does, similar to Auphonic, where it will really optimize bad audio and try and repair that. So it'll try and, take out reverb. It'll try reduce background noise if you're at events or you're outside recording, if you're doing nature podcasts, for example. So there's a lot of good tools from the audio side. I see as advanced tools as helping you in the production side. It's great, yeah, that you can create clips, etc., from promotion afterwards. So you can use stuff like Riverside, Opus Clip, etc., to create short little clips to help you promote your show. But I feel it's really on the production side where a lot of time can often be spent, and advanced tools like that can be super useful to help you, help you actually do that. For example, if I go over to here, for example, so let's go over to my my Captivate screen. Oh, wait a minute, I stopped sharing. Let's just bring that back up. Egypt. So let me bring up my episode screen here. So at Captivate, we have a tool called Spark AI. And what that does is so if I just click into one of these episodes, what Spark AI does, much like other AI tools, is it'll provide a transcript for you, and it'll also give you AI episode assets. So you've got episode title, summary, show notes, takeaways, chapters, etc. We'll also recommend ad markers. So if you do have ads in your show and maybe you place them in the mid-row, we'll make a suggestion of the best place to insert that based on the context. So for example, a pause in the conversation, a transition to a new question or topic, etc. We'll make a recommendation. You don't have to use that, but I find that's really useful to have. And we also have a feature called episode planning, where we'll suggest episodes that you could create based on your analytics. So we'll look at the last 30 days of your analytics, for example, and we'll suggest episodes to create based on the most popular episodes, as well as what's been discussed online. So that's the kind of stuff that I feel would really come into use when it comes to um, advanced tools. Anything that can sort of save you time and then help you promote your show afterwards is going to save you the time that you would normally have to spend on production side or the promotion side. That allows you to spend more time creating and doing stuff that's hopefully going to help you to grow. And yeah, Levelator is an awesome one. That is an awesome one. That's a great one again for leveling out the volume and making sure that your volumes, etc., are all the same. And again, I'm pretty sure that's compatible with pretty much every editor or every DAW that's out there. So yeah, that's another great tool. So great suggestion for sure. So I think that's all the questions that came in pre-show. Let me just double check my document. Oh, there's one actually. There's one here that I missed. Frank again, Frank. Sorry, I missed this one. So I just reviewed an excellent indie podcast that shares the title with two other indie podcasts. Do you have any solutions that you can imagine for this? And that's the thing with podcasting is there's a lot of shows that will have the same name, or they've already been out and a name that you thought was great. You go to industry publication Pod News and use their search bar and type your name or your podcast name into the search bar, and all of a sudden you'll see a whole bunch of podcasts that are either named the same or very similar. And I think that's something that you won't be able to really avoid unless it's really, really, super specific. So, for example, my 5 Random Questions podcast, when I was doing some research for that, there are some podcasts that had random questions sections as part of their main podcast, but there wasn't one that was actually called 5 Random Questions. So that kind of gave me a bit of a step up there. But I know in the past I've also created other podcasts and come up with ideas for names. And as I mentioned, go to podnews.net, and at the top right hand side you've got like a search bar. Type the name that you're looking to give your podcast up there, and that will push back a list of all the shows that are either named that already or have very similar names. So it's one of these things that you can't really avoid unless, like I say, you get super specific. What you could do is just tweak it a little bit. So do you use your name, for example? Do you use a bit of a tagline in the title? So let's say you've got a technology podcast called Bits and Bytes. Do you then have that after that, video gaming in the 80s or something like that, whatever that looks like? So that helps it stand out a little bit. Obviously, your artwork, that's going to be key because that's the thing that people see right away is the artwork and the name of the shows on the podcast artwork. So you want that to be, you don't want to get too clever with the podcast title because generally you want to make the podcast title the name of your podcast. You want to make that something that people would search for or are interested in. So for my show, 1 Minute Podcast Tips, for example, I'm looking for podcasters. I would like podcasters that are looking for tips to, type in podcast tip shows or whatever. So that's why I went for that title and it's on the artwork. So there's going to be times where you will have same names or very, very similar names. So it's then just tweaking it. So like I say, can you, put on the tagline? So for example, there's a podcast called, what is it? Fun Fact Friday. Okay, so Fun Fact Friday is like, it's no longer being made, but that was a podcast, a daddy and daughter podcast, awesome podcast. And as the name suggests, every Friday an episode would drop that would have fun facts. And David and Leela, who were the dad and the daughter, would discuss these facts and are they true? Is there like a bit of makeup behind them, etc. But they just had Fun Fact Friday. If you go to Pod News, you'll probably see a whole bunch of podcasts with Fun Fact Friday as the name. But they would have Fun Fact Friday with Leila and David as the name of the podcast. So that stands it out a bit more. So again, just little tweaks like that where you have a bit of a difference in the title. And it's just a matter of building it up, right? You're just always saying that name in every episode. or whatever you promote it online, give the name of the podcast as opposed to just a shortened version. So people are starting to get that brand lift and that brand recall that every time someone's thinking of a podcast tips podcast or a fun fact podcast or etc., they're recommending your show over someone else's. And you're very welcome. I'm glad you enjoyed that. It's taken a bit of a hiatus to do these fun live streams, and I'll probably do some version of this into the podcast itself. So yeah, just taking a bit of a summer hiatus, and then we'll back into the 1 minute tips. But yeah, I appreciate that, Dave. Thank you for that. So what I'm going to do, that's covered the questions on the ones that came in. So I'm going to start wrapping up. That's about 40, yeah, about 45 minutes. Not too bad. Um, as I mentioned, I'll be looking to maybe do this every other week. I'll see, if it's useful for you. Let me know. That'd be great. But I'll probably do them every other week or so. And if you have questions or you want to pop onto the stream itself, I'll have a little link. I'll create a little link so you can jump into the stream and ask your question, on the stream itself. But yeah, I'm going to start wrapping it up because it's super warm here today. It's like 31 degrees currently, and the lights, etc., are starting to take their toll on this old head of mine. So, like I say, I'll probably be back in 2 weeks' time, so August 16, I would imagine. I think my son's soccer is not my football, but soccer, I guess, is not on that weekend. So I'll be good to go for that. Whatever your podcasting goals are, like I say, you can follow this channel. I'll be putting a lot more tips up soon. Follow the 1 minute podcast tips, or as the sort of logo at the side there, get more tips at beabetterpodcaster.com. That's got articles and videos, and my podcasts are there. Got a newsletter you can sign up for, and I share weekly tips or roughly weekly tips through that based on more growth and more deep dive on that. So we'd love to see you over there too. But in the meantime, thanks for jumping onto this first live stream. I hope you have a great rest of weekend, rest of Saturday, and the weather's kind to you, a lot kinder here. And we'll see you the next time on the live